share my screen. Yes, so before getting into ethical hacking, I would like to make certain terms familiar with. First, we'll speak about the threat. So a threat is an environment, or it can be called as a situation that could lead to a potential breach of security. So this ethical hackers, they look for and they try to prioritize the threats when performing a security analysis. So generally in a computer security, an exploit is a piece of software which is going to take an advantage of a bug or a glitch or any kind of vulnerability. So it leads to an unauthorized access. It can lead to privilege escalations or even denial of service on a computer system. So there are actually two methods of classifying exploits. So one is a remote exploit that works over a network and exploits security vulnerabilities without any prior access to a vulnerable system. And the next type is a local exploit. It requires prior access to a vulnerable system to increase the privileges. So overall, an exploit can be defined as a way to breach the security of an IT system through a vulnerability. So if you ask me what is vulnerability, it is an existence of a software bug or a software flaw, we can call it as. Or it may be a logical design or an implementation error that will lead to an unexpected or an undesirable event executing kind of damaging instructions to the system. So it is highly necessary to keep in mind that vulnerability is going to be a weakness that can be manipulated, while a threat is an action. It can be compared to an action or an occurrence or an event that jeopardizes security. So we have to identify the weakness that can have an effect on the security aspect. So this a weakness, what is a weakness actually? Weakness is a target, something owing to an analytical or a design or an operation, or you can call it to be a failure. So like information system weakness is due to the system security procedures. Like when you don't have a proper infrastructure design, or when you give a control, when the admin's control gets exploited. So these things are called as weakness in a target. So weakness has to be corrected during a design or an implementation. Usually the hackers will always have an idea of how to compromise the device or a network or an application or even a protocol. So the target of evolution is a system, actually, the system which we are actually holding with the data or the critical informations, or it may be a server that an organization uses. So that you call it to be a target of evolution. So it may be a system, or it can also be a program, or it can be a network, which is subjected for a security analysis or an attack. So this target of evolution is a name given to the asset that is actually being protected. Your organization may think that your target is actually protected, but actually it is not. So in an IT system, a product or a component or a networking agent, anything may be a target of evolution. So an attack occurs whenever a system is compromised based on the vulnerability factors. So here, hackers use tools to find the systems that may be vulnerable to exploit because of the operating system, or due to the network configuration, or applications that are installed on a system. So all these are the factors. So next, what is an attack? So who will attack? So that should be the idea which everybody should be very clear of. So attack is a action that is taken against a target to affect the integrity or the availability or generally the authenticity of the system. So attacks can be classified under two ways. One, it can be active, and the next type is passive. And this can be initiated from within the organization or even outside the organization. So within the organization, we call them to be malicious insiders. And the various types of attacks include active attacks first. So these active attacks, what it does is it tries to alter the target system to affect the privacy or credibility of the system and the accessibility of the system. So passive attacks is, you can tell them to be breaching the confidentiality of the data of the system without impacting the system state. So the organization may not even know whether their confidentiality of the data is breached or not. Here, inside attacks are launched by the authorized user from inside the network. Any one of the employee may be an attacker or can be a hacker who attacks the system from inside. And outside attacks are conducted by an attacker without network authorization. So what usually the company does is, since they are facing all these kind of challenges, they try to employ ethical hackers to do illegal hacking. They try their employees, that is their ethical hackers, to exploit the vulnerabilities. And these ethical hackers, they go by the names of like security testers, or they're called as penetration testers too. So if you ask me, like, is hacking an ethical task? Yes, definitely an ethical task, because ethical hackers are usually, they're called as security professionals, or they're called as the network penetration testers, who use their hacking skills and their tools for defensive and protective purpose. Without ethical hackers, actually an organization will not be able to identify from where the threats are occurring and what are the preventive measures they can take. So ethical hackers are security professionals who are going to test their network and system security for vulnerabilities. They use the same tools that the hacker may try to use to compromise a network. So the activities between a normal hacker and an ethical hacker is going to be the same. It's just going to be the same. But an ethical hacker is legally authorized to hack or steal relevant information from an organization, and they get paid for it. So if you ask me what is the organization going to gain from this, they are going to they're going to identify how the damage is caused for their corporate reputation, or how they are going to steal or reveal the data, and what is the reason for slowing their business process, and where the company is actually compromising the integrity. So all these factors the company will be able to identify. So that is the reason why they actually employ an ethical hacker into their organization. So next is, we are going to identify different types of hacking technologies. So there are actually many methods and tools that exist for locating vulnerabilities, for compromising systems, for running exploits. Trojans, backdoors, sniffers, rootkits, buffer overflows, SQL injections. So these are all kind of technologies that can be used to hack a system or a network. So here, most hacking tools exploit the weakness in major 4 areas. So first is the operating system. So talking about the operating system, many system administrators install operating system with a default setting, which may actually result in potential vulnerabilities, and that remains unidentified. And from the application perspective, applications are usually they aren't tested for vulnerability, like when developers are writing the code. So, which may result in a programming flaws, and the hacker can have a positive way of approaching it. Next, we will see about the shrink wrap code. So it is kind of an extra features the common user isn't aware of actually. So one example is the macros in Microsoft Word. So this will allow a hacker to execute program from within the application itself. And next, about the misconfiguration. Systems can be misconfigured, or it can lead to a common security settings, which increases the ease for the users, which may result in vulnerability or an attack. So these are all the different types of hacking technologies, or the hacker may think which part of the system they wanted to hack into. Next, we will be understanding about the different phases involved in the ethical hacking process. So an ethical hacker follows the process similar to those of the malicious hacker. It's just going to be the same. All the functionalities, everything is just going to be the same. So the steps to gain and maintain the entry into the computer system are similar. No matter, we don't have any connection with what's the hacker's intention are going to be. So the first step is reconnaissance. So this active reconnaissance involves probing the network. That means to discover the individual host, what its IP address is, and what are the services associated on the network. So this usually involves more risk of detection than the passive reconnaissance, and you can call it to be rattling the doorknobs. So like rattling the doorknobs is if you're trying to steal into a house, or if you're trying to break into a house, you have to get into a way where the people will not be able to find you. Directly going and fidgeting with a doorknob is giving a clue to the users to identify it so easily. So this active reconnaissance is compared to rattling the doorknobs, and can give a hacker his identification or an indication to the users that something is in a wrong state. Next, we'll see about the passive reconnaissance. So this is going to involve gathering of informations generally. So before you identify, or before you are going to fix a potential target, you need to gather the information. Well, it may be an individual, or it may be a company or an organization. So passive reconnaissance can be as simple as, like, for example, watching a building, just to identify what time the employees enter the building and when they are leaving. So all these are kind of passive reconnaissance. So however, this is usually done using the internet searching. Internet searching, in other words, a Googling about a company or an organization, just to gain some information. So this process is generally called as information gathering, and social engineering and a dumpster diving. So these things are also considered to be a passive way of information gathering methods. And next, sniffing the network is another means of passive reconnaissance. And it is able to, grasp information such as IP address, ranges, name conventions, the hidden servers in the network, and other available services on your network. So sniffing the network traffic is like similar to a building monitoring. So the hacker keenly watches the flow of data to see what time these specific transactions takes place and where the traffic is going. So both the passive and the active reconnaissance can lead to discovery of useful information, which is used for an attack. Like, for example, it is usually easy to find the type of web server and the operating system, like your version number and that the company is actually using. So this information will enable a hacker to find a vulnerability in that particular version of OS and exploit the vulnerability to have more access into the system. And next is scanning, the second step. So this scanning is going to be a extension of Reconnaissance phase. It's not a separate phase. It's just an extension of the first phase, but it's going to involve much more in-depth of probing, which is considered an extension of active Reconnaissance. So here during the scanning phase, the attacker tries to identify specific vulnerabilities. Like vulnerability scanners are actually most widely used tools. And one type is port scanner. They are used to recognize the listening ports that provide clues to the type of service that are actually running. So hackers are seeing if any informations that can help them, penetrate an attack, such as like IP address or about the user accounts or the system name. So all these are getting much depth into probing. And next is gaining access. So gaining access is usually the goal of an attacker. The overall objective of an attacker is to gain access to a system. So vulnerabilities are actually discovered during this Recognizance and scanning phase, and now they are going to exploit into gaining access. So the method of connection that the hacker uses to exploit can be a LAN, a local area network. It can be either wired or wireless, and the local access to PCs, internet, or even an offline. And it is very important to maintain the access. Like if once an attacker has successfully gained an access, they need to maintain access through installing a backdoor or a rootkit. So that is very, very important. So hackers, what they try to do is they try to tighten the security, that you call it to be hardening the system. So they try to harden the system from other hackers. Once they try to gain a full access, there are chances for hackers from some other, with some other objective can probe into the system. So what the present hacker will do is they'll try to harden the system from other hackers or from other security personnel. So by securing their exclusive access with backdoors, rootkits, Trojans, virus, anything they can use. So once the hacker owns a system, owning a system is having a full access to a system. Okay, so they use it as a base to launch additional attacks. First, they start with a simple attack, and once they have a confidence level, once their confidence level has boosted up that they can access the complete data of the system, they try to launch additional attacks. So this owned system we can refer to as a zombie system, an affected system. And next is the cover. So once hackers have been able to gain access and they are also maintaining access, they cover their tracks to avoid their identity. They try to avoid detection by the security personnel to continue to use their own system. So hackers, they try to remove all the traces of the attack, like log files. Like you have many tools such as Netcat and other Trojans can be used to erase the evidence from the log files. So other tools, other options can be steganography, next hiding the data inside another data, tunneling methods. So all these are some of the techniques where the hacker can hide his identity from the security personnel. Yes, so I was explaining each step. So these are all the steps actually. So next we will move into the hacktivism. Yes. So what is this hacktivism? So hacktivism can commonly target the government agencies or kind of political groups or any other entities where where the perception of that particular group may be bad, or they may have a negative role. So government entities and multinational companies will be mostly among the targets of hacktivism. So here, what the hackers do is they try to divide themselves into three groups, like black hats, white hats, gray hats, and you have the suicide hackers. So we will see about each one. So these hackers are divided into these groups based on the activities they are going to perform. So black hat guys are actually, you can call them to be bad guys. So they are the malicious hackers, or they use the skill which is illegal or for malicious purpose. So like they break into to violate the system's integrity of the remote missions and malicious intent. So having gained unauthorized access, so these black hat hackers destroy the important data of the system. They try to deny the user service, and they can cause problems for their targets. So black hat hackers can be easily differentiated from white hat hackers because their actions are completely malicious. And talking about the white hat category, the ethical hackers, they fall into this white hat category basically when they become a security professionals or who use their skill in an ethical manner. So these white hats hackers, they are called as an ethical hacker, who are employed for a company for their hacking skills, and they use their skill for some defensive purpose. So these white hat hackers have the knowledge of hacking, and they try to use different hacker tool set, and they try to use their knowledge to locate the where the actual weakness and vulnerability actually resides in the company. So they actually help the organization. So they are called as white hat category. And next comes the gray hat. So this gray hats actually believes in complete disclosure. So gray hats are hackers who may actually work offensively or defensively. So it depends on the situation. So like this is the dividing line between a hacker and a cracker. So both are going to be the powerful forces on the internet, and both will remain permanently. Like if some individual qualifies for both category, so these gray hats fall under this type of category. So like the existence of individual, like division between these two group of people. So they can either be a malicious hacker or they can be a security professional. They fall in between category. And the last category is suicide hackers. They are actually self-proclaimed ethical hackers. They are actually interested in hacker tools from the curiosity standpoint. Like nowadays, many students, even when I try to ask them, what do you want to become from in a professional side, which what is your goal for in a company? You know, the most answers I get is becoming an ethical hacker. It's because from the curiosity standpoint, they wanted to, highlight security problems in a system, or they want to secure the systems properly. So what happens is these hackers are doing their victims a favor. So for instance, like if one of the weaknesses is discovered in a service, like let's say for an investment bank, the hacker is doing the bank a favor by giving the bank a chance to rectify those vulnerabilities. So these are self-proclaimed ethical hackers trying to break into the security field in the name of consultants. So most companies actually don't look favorably on someone who appears on their doorstep with confidential data. Like if I'm just going to a company telling that your data is not secure, nobody is just going to listen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break into the security holes And then the company will be able to identify, they will be able to accept what was their flaws, and they will try to, employ such kind of self-proclaimed ethical hackers. So maybe the organization may either tell a small thank you for this information, or they will, the highest step where they can go is like they can go in for calling a police to arrest this particular ethical hacker. So it depends on the mindset of the company. So being able to identify the different types of hackers is very important, and we should know under which category they fall into. So next we will see about the skills that is required to become an ethical hacker. So ethical hackers, they actually stay a step ahead of the malicious hacker. So they are computer system experts. They'll be very knowledgeable about the computer programming. They should have a clear understanding about the networking and the operating systems. And definitely they should have an in-depth knowledge about targeted platforms like about the Windows, Unix, Linux platforms, and most important, patience is highly required to become an ethical hacker. So persistence and perseverance are important qualities that hackers should possess because of the length of the time it takes to reveal, the required data from the system. So vulnerability research. This is actually a process of discovering the vulnerabilities and how we are going to design weakness that could lead to an attack on a system. So it is essential that a system administrator should keep on the latest virus. He should, he should be updated with the latest viruses, trojans, and other common exploits in order to adequately protect their system and the network. Like becoming familiar with the newest threats, the administrator should know how to detect it first and then to prevent and also to recover from the attacks. So these are some of the skills that is required to become an ethical hacker. And next we will see about the types of ethical hacks. So the most common methods are first remote network. So a remote network hack, it tries to attempts to stimulate an intruder launching an attack over the internet. So here the ethical hacker tries to break or find a vulnerability in the outside defenses of the networks, like a firewall or a proxy or a router. So this is a remote network. Next, remote dial-up network. So this remote dial-up network, here what the hacker tries is to stimulate the intruder from launching an attack against the client's modem. Like, for example, war dialing is a process of repetitive dialing to find up an open system. And that is one of the best example of such an attack, remote dial-up network. And next is the local network. So in a local network, the hacker, stimulates someone with a physical access. He tries to gain additional unauthorized access using the local network. So an ethical hacker must gain direct access to a local network in order to launch this type of attack. And next type is stolen equipments. A stolen equipment is a theft of critical information resource, like such as a laptop which is owned by an employee, or informations like a username, password, his security settings, encryption types. So but while stealing a laptop, when he's able to identify all these factors, then you call it to be a stolen equipment. And next is social engineering. This social engineering attack, it checks the integrity of an organization's employee by using the face-to-face communication to gather information, which can be used for an attack. So social engineering attacks will again try to acquire username, password, other organizational security measures taken. So all these. And next is your physical entry. So a physical entry is attempting to compromise the organization's physical premises. Like an ethical hacker, when he gains an physical access to an organization, he goes, he accesses the system. So he plants a virus or a Trojan or a rootkit or any keylogger. So when he goes and installs them physically on a particular machine, that you call it to be a physical entry. Okay, like your keyloggers will be able to use the keystrokes. They try to capture the keystrokes from the keyboard. So that is directly targeting a system of a organization. So these are some of the types. And next, moving on into the legal implications of hacking. So whether you are a hacker, whether you are a cracker or an ethical hacker, we should know the penalties or the consequences that we are going to face when you're going to have an unauthorized hacking into a system. So no ethical hacking activities associated with a network penetration test or a security audit test should always begin with a signed level of document. Like they should have a legal document that I am employed as an ethical hacker, so I have basic operations to be carried out on the system. So there should be some legal document giving the ethical hacker a permission to perform the hacking activities from the targeted organization. So ethical hackers need to be kind of judicious with their hacking skill, and they should also be able to recognize and accept the consequences of misusing those skills. So actually the law it sometimes tries to give even life sentences for hackers who endangers the life of others. It is that serious. And malicious hackers who are going to create a life-threatening situation by attacking a computer network of a powerful company or for a public service, they can also be prosecuted under the law. And Section 66 of IT Act 2000, it actually deals with accumulating, like it creates or prescribes the punishment for hacking. So hacking is actually a punishable offense in India, with an imprisonment of, I think, up to 3 years, or with a fine, some fine. So I don't want to get deep into that, but yes, you do have certain laws which you have to abide by. And yes, so we are going to the next topic, which is footprinting and reconnaissance. So this footprinting, it's going to involve accumulating of data regarding a target's environment and an architecture. So usually this is used for the purpose of finding ways to intrude into that particular environment. So before that, you need to capture lots and lots of data. So here footprinting begins by determining the target system, or it may be an application or a physical location of a target. So once this information is known, specific information about an organization is gathered using non-intrusive methods. For example, an organization's web page. So that web page will provide a personal directory or a list of employees. Actually, that gives a useful information to the hacker who needs to use social engineering attack to reach that particular objective. So the hacker may also simply do a Google search. He tries to search for people to locate information about the employees. So this Google search engine can be used in creative ways to perform this information gathering. And so when you're going to detect techniques which is used to gather information about a target, that you call it to be a reconnaissance. So this reconnaissance is a cyber security which is used by the attackers to gather as much as information as possible about a target system, and to conduct, various types of malicious activity like gaining unauthorized service or denial of service. So all these things. So this is going to be a crucial aspect of a successful attack. And because there are gaps in the security of a well-managed network, whether the network may be small or large, definitely there will be security gaps. So the attacker need to chain these gaps together to exploit multiple vulnerabilities. So better understanding of how an attacker is going to gain this information will actually help to model the aspect of attackers' behavior, to build a better security organization, to have an eye on the defensive strategies of an attacker, or to prevent attackers from easily gaining the valuable information of our organization. So this is a very important step, and actually numerous tools are available to help collect informations about the organization. You can call it to be a competitive intelligence. So when you use a tool along with your applied knowledge, you call it to be a competitive intelligence, and you add innovations in gathering the informations. And if you want to be much more innovative, I'll just give you an example. Like if you have a job posting from a corporate company, so they will provide the information about the job description. There will be a paragraph about a job description. So that will give certain information as what is the type of infrastructure they have, sometimes about the type of servers or the devices, about a company's network. So other informations which is actually given in an authentic website, in an authentic corporate job posting, may actually turn out to be the hacker's idea about gaining extra knowledge about the company. So here, other informations like, for example, internet technologies, the operating system or the hardware, the email address, the contact address which they give to send your resume, the phone numbers, and the policies and the procedures of the company. So all these are actually giving a clue for the hacker to get into better access about the company. So this is one of the example of competitive intelligence. So this Google Doc, I just want to explain about this Google Doc, not in much detail, but since this Google hacking is becoming very common, I just wanted to talk about this Google Doc. So this Google Doc is also known as Google Docking or Google hacking. So it's going to involve advanced operators in Google search engine to locate specific errors of text within the search result. So for a normal person, for a common person, Google is just a search engine which is used to find the text or images, news, or anything. So, but from the hacker's world, this Google is a useful hacking tool. So here, a normal person will not know how to use a Google to hack website. Like, well, you can't hack sites directly using Google, but it has tremendous web crawling capabilities that it can index almost anything your website is including, any kind of sensitive information. Like this means you could be exposing too much information about your web technologies, like usernames, password, general vulnerabilities, even without knowing it. This Google Docking is a practice to find the vulnerable web applications and servers, which is using the native Google search engine alone. So here, what happens is, unless you block specific resources from your website, so you can use robots.txt file. So this robot.txt file is a file which is actually containing certain instruction for bots that which will instruct them, it'll tell them which web pages they can and where they cannot access. So this robot.txt file are most relevant for web crawlers from a search engines like Google. So this file is included in the source file of most of the websites. So only if you try to include this type of file, your website's critical informations will not go out. Sometimes web crawlers, sometimes they may listen to this instruction, but certain web crawlers will not listen to all these instructions because their aim is to hack the system. So sometimes this robot.txt file may not work. So here, what happens is this. There are two different types of bots. One is a good bot and one is a bad bot. So I already told that good bot will try to visit this txt file before viewing any other pages or a domain. But this bad bot, what it will do, it will ignore the robot's txt file and it will have its own process to find the web pages, and it will start grabbing all the sensitive informations from your website. And yes, so there are certain specific keywords which you can use, certain syntax. So this site actually searches a specific website or a domain. So this site actually it should be supplied with the website after a colon. Next, file type is searches only within the text of a particular type of file. So the file type the search must be supplied after a colon. And link searches, it searches within hyperlinks for a search term and identifies the linked pages which identifies the version of the web pages and all. And untitled search is for a term within the title of a document. So, and in URL search is within the URL of a document. So search term must follow with again a colon. So these are all the certain syntax which you can use for finding the informations about the website. And next thing is information gathering methodology. So there are certain steps. So there are logical steps for information gathering. So footprinting process is performed during the first two steps of the initial information gathering, locating the network range. And so searching public records. So here public informations may not provide provide immediate data which you are expecting for, but it can be useful to build a wider picture. Like various sites, they offer information about their whatever, depending on the company, they will provide the contact information or about the reviews of the company. So all these things. So some of the examples, like you can use Google, VitalRec, Switchboard. So all these will give you information about a broader perspective of a organization's background. And for example, this Whois is a utility. It is used to gather IP address and domain informations. Like this Whois is an information gathering program. It's going to allow you to find all available informations about the IP address, host name or a domain, like including a country, state, province. So when you go access this Whois, it gives you an you just have to request specifying the IP address, and it will scan the IP address for open ports and for other forms of source footprinting. So I'll just try to share the screen of Whois so that we'll have a better idea of what it is. So this is a website of Whois. So I've given some IP address here, and if I'm going to do a search, it's going to provide me certain informations about the IP. So it will give you certain informations about the IP, which the hacker will actually try to use all these data. It can be of any IP address. So it will try to or you can give any domain. So it will give you informations about the administrative contact, technical details, the domain status, when it was created, some technical statements about it, the country, the province. So all these informations you can gather using this WHOIS. So I'll just go back to the PPT. So using this WHOIS, like you can determine the name servers that the company use. You can try to transfer all the records for which the DNS server is responsible. So this you call it to be a zone transfer. So to determine an organization's primary DNS server, you look for a DNS server containing the start of an authority record. So once the primary DNS server has been determined, you perform another zone transfer to see all the host computers on the network. So this information can help to form an organization's network diagram. So the information can be very less, but using that, you go in for a broader view of an organization. So the other tools which is used to categorize the type of information, like domain name search, you can use tools like DNS information tools like view DNS, or you can go in for, as usual, who is smart, who is, and so all these things. And you can go in for the NS lookups. So it is actually a built-in command in Linux and Windows. So this tool, it queries the DNS servers for recording the information. It is included in both Unix, Linux, as well as in Windows operating system. So hacking tools like, for example, SAMSPADE, it also includes NS lookup tools. And if you know how to use the tool usefully, then you can very well go in for becoming an ethical hacker. So DNS stuff is another one of the useful tools. So instead of using the command line NS lookup tool with its switches to gather DNS record information, you can just access the website dnsstuff.com it is, and you can do a DNS record search online. So all these things. And sorry. Yes, and next thing is finding the address range of the network. Like every ethical hacker needs to understand how to find the network range and subnet mask of a target system. So that is the basic knowledge which an ethical hacker should have. So IP addresses here are used to locate and connect to the target system. So you can find IP address in the internet registries such as ARIN, or you can use IANA, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So an ethical hacker may also need to find the geographical location of a target system. And this task can be accomplished by tracing the route the message takes to the destination IP address. Like you can use the tool trace route, visual route, neo trace. So it will identify the route to the target. Like if you just go to your command prompt, I'll just share the screen. Yes, give the command. when you use the command traceroute, what happens is it will help you to trace your target's network and all the intermediate routers that is actually available, intermediate routers that is actually available towards your destination. So that can be one of the ways, like you can obtain internal IP address of a host machine, even the internet gateway for an organization. So these addresses can be used in an attack for further scanning process. So other tools like, for example, geospiders. This geospider actually plots network activity on a world map. Like you can use the Google Earth. It provides geographical information about almost any location. So there are many meta search engines where the users request to several other search engines and then it gets displayed as an aggregated result. So all these things. So just to understand how the trace route is used in footprinting trace route is, it's just like a packet tracking tool. So it is available for almost all the operating systems. So it operates by sending it uses an ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, echo to each hop, that is router or gateway, that is residing along the path until the destination address is reached. So when the ICMP messages are sent back from the router, the TTL, that is the time to live, will be decremented by 1 for each router along the path. So this will allow a hacker to determine how many hops a router is taking from the sender. So these are some of the techniques, and but one problem with this traceroute tool is sometimes it goes timed out. If it becomes a timed out, it will be shown with an asterisk. So which means that particular router has been guarded with a firewall or a packet filtering router, you call it to be. So although a firewall stops the traceroute tool from discovering internal host on network, it can still be altered. It will give an ethical hacker an alert message that a firewall is present between these. So an hacker will try to think of other techniques that is going to bypass the firewall that can be used. So here, this command trace RT identifies the routers, as I have already shown in the command prompt, the located en route to the destinations network. So here we go with the so when you're going to begin your scanning, you should have a clear understanding of how the networks are connected to the internet network. Okay, so here my attack machine has a public IP of 216.6.1.100. So here the organization is being scanned that has a public IP. So the public IP here is 216.1.1.1. Here, no web server software is installed on the firewall machine. So actually web servers like FTP or HTTP, it runs on the Windows SQL and not the firewall itself. So when the request for these services are made, the firewall is actually going to reroute those requests to the Windows SQL server operating on the internal network. So although Windows SQL is not linked directly to the internet, here the internet users can use services on the machine due to the redirection of firewalls. So that is what is depicted in this picture. And next we will be moving on to the scanning networks. So scanning. So after an attacker has identified a targeted system and he has done all this kinds of reconnaissance activity, the attacker will move on to gaining the entry into the target system. So with network scanning, the attacker can obtain information about the target, like what operating system it uses and what services, what applications are running. So all these kinds of information. So we can call scanning to be an extended reconnaissance in which the attacker tries to find ways to intrude into their target system. So here, it is very important to understand protocols such as TCP, UDP, ICMP to have better understanding about the network aspect. During scanning, the hacker tries to gather information about a network and also about the individual systems that are being connected into the network. So like your IP address, installed applications, operating system. So this will actually give or help the attacker to decide what type of exploit we can use to hack a particular system. So here in scanning, we are going to locate the systems which are alive and response to the network. So ethical hackers actually, they use it to identify the target system's IP address. And yes, so port scanning. So port scanning is a process of identifying the open ports that are available in your TCP IP ports on a system. So port scanning tools will actually help the hackers to learn about the services that are available on a given system. So each system or application on a machine will be associated with a port number. So that we all know. Like for example, a port scanning tool, it identifies port 80 as an open ports. So it indicates a web server is running on that particular system. So hacker needs to be familiar with well-known port numbers. So some of the port numbers for FTP, it is 21, for Telnet it is 23, for HTTP it is 80, SMTP is 25, POP3 is 110, HTTPS is 443. So all these things, the ethical hacker or a hacker will be well versed of before getting into the hacking process. And next is your network scanning. So network scanning is a procedure for identifying the active host on a network. So whether either to attack them or as a network security assessment. So here, hosts are actually identified by their individual IP address. And this network scanning tools, they try to identify all the live or responding hosts on the network and their corresponding IP addresses. And the third is vulnerability scanning. In vulnerability scanning, we are going to proactively identify the vulnerabilities of a computer system, which on a network. So generally, a vulnerability scanner first identifies the operating system, the version number. It also includes other service packs that may be installed. Then the vulnerability scanner will identify what are all the weaknesses or the vulnerabilities in that particular operating system. And during the next phase, the hacker will exploit those weaknesses in order to gain access into the system. So port scanning analysis, it gives a understanding about the range of IPs to identify services that are running. Next, network scanning investigates the activity on the network, such as tracking the data flows or the network devices functionalities. And they can also detect the active host on networks. And vulnerability scanning is, it proactively identifies certain security vulnerabilities on a network to evaluate where the system can be exploited. So yes, so these are all the objectives of scanning: to identify the live system on a network, to find out the open ports, figure out the target's operating system, figure out what services are running, find out the IP addresses, then identify a particular application, and then find the vulnerability in any system on a network. So these are the general objectives of scanning. So next we will be moving on to the scanning methodology. So understanding scanning methodology is very, very essential for selecting appropriate tools. So that is why we are going in for this scanning methodology. Without hacking tools, it is not possible to hack. So we look at the various stages of this scanning methodology. So first, scanning methodology starts with checking for systems that are live on the network. That is the systems that respond to the probes or connection requests. Like in simple terms, when you have to determine whether the system are live to perform a ping sweeps of the IP address range. So all systems that responds with a ping reply are considered to be live on a network. So this is an example. Here, Internet Control Message Protocol scanning is a process of sending an ICMP request or a ping to all hosts on the network to determine which one are live and responding to pings. So one benefit of this ICMP scanning is that it can be parallelly run, because meaning that all systems are scanned at the same time. So it can run quickly on the entire network. So the personal firewall software or the network firewalls sometimes can block a system from responding to ping sweeps. So that is one of the challenges here. And another problem is that computer have to be kept in an on state. It has to be powered on for it to be scanned. So that is one of the challenge here. And next is checking for the open ports. Almost any intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system will detect and alert the security administrator to a ping sweep if it is going to occur in our network. So most firewalls and proxy servers will block the pinging response. So a hacker can't accurately determine whether systems are available using a ping sweep alone. So in that case, you need to go and check for the open ports. So this is the second step. So port scanning here is going to be a method which is used for checking the open ports. So the process of port scanning is, it's going to involve probing of each ports on the host to determine which ports are open. So port scanning, generally, it's going to give more information than your ping sweep about a host or a vulnerability on a system. So by identifying an open port, a hacker can usually identify all the services also that are associated, especially with that particular port number. And next is banner grabbing and operating system identification. So this is also called as fingerprinting the TCP/IP stack. So the process here, it's going to allow the hacker to identify particular vulnerabilities or a target with a high value on a network. So hackers, what they usually do is they look for the easiest way to gain access to a system. Usually never a hacker will find a complex way of attacking a system or breaking open a system. All the possibilities will be very, very easy way of accessing the system. So banner grabbing is one such method. So it is a process of opening a connection and reading the responses sent by the applications. Like many emails, FTP, web servers will actually respond to telnet connections with the name and version of the software. So this will give a hacker in fingerprinting the OS and the application softwares. Like for example, a Microsoft Exchange email server would only be installed on Windows OS. So this is one of an example. Next, we need to prepare the proxy server. So here a proxy server is a computer which is going to act as an intermediary between the hacker and the target computer. So using the proxy server, the hacker will try to become anonymous on a network. So here the hacker first makes a connection to the proxy server, and then the request is forwarded to the connection to the target. So this connection can be created using the existing connection to the proxy. So these are all the steps which are taking place in a scanning methodology. And these are some of the additional factors that we have to be familiar with, or which we need to know. So one is a three-way handshaking. So three-way handshaking, here a system is going to receive a SYN packet from the remote system and responds with a acknowledgement packet if its port is open. And finally, the sending system sends an acknowledgement. Again, if a port is closed and receives the initial sync packet, it sends back an RST acknowledgement packet. So this is a three-way handshaking. And anonymizers. Anonymizers is it's a very important term for hacking. So these are going to be services that attempts to make a web surfing anonymous. So it utilizes websites which acts as a proxy server for a web client. And the anonymizers remove all the identifying information from a user's computer while the user surfs the internet. So it's going to ensure the privacy of the user. To visit a website anonymously, what the hacker does is, he enters the website address into the anonymizer software. And next, the anonymizer software makes a request to the selected site. So all the requests and web pages are relayed through the anonymizer site, making it difficult to track the actual requester of a web page. And spoofing. Spoofing is a hacker can spoof an IP address when scanning the target system. So just to minimize the chance of detection. So one drawback of spoofing an IP address is a TCP session can't be successfully completed. So source routing lets an attacker specify the route that packet takes through the internet. And to detect the IP address spoofing, you need to compare the time to live values. The attacker's time to live values will be different from the spoofed address real time to live values. So these are some of the additional techniques or factors which you should be aware during ethical hacking. And yes, next will be system hacking, which will be handled in the next session.
Okay. Is there any question so far? There was a question posted in the chat box, Preetha.
Yes, sir, I will look into it.
Yeah, what are the tools or commands used to perform port scanning?
Netstat can be used to perform port scanning, so it will display all the open ports.
Even Nmap may be used, I think.
Yeah, Nmap can be used.
Participants will have a short break. We will back again by 10:30. I request everyone to join by 10:30 without delay. Preetha will have a small break.
Sure, sir.